So, questions from the audience, please. The lady.
They're more difficult ones.
Yes, at the end.
I'd like to know what you feel about the way Tony Blair seemed to abandon public services and allow the private sector to take such a dominant role, which resulted in public services becoming increasingly fragmented and the source of great profit for many private organisations. I worked in public sector all during the Thatcher years when it was almost a disgrace to work for the public sector. And I was so thrilled when Tony Blair came to power. And he was the biggest disappointment of my life. We just watched the public sector being taken to pieces. And whilst I acknowledged that there were huge problems, I was extremely disappointed that he, rather than actually deal with those problems and bring the public sector up to the level it needed to be, he simply abandoned it and said, we will let whatever works work. Meanwhile, the private sector got in there and made hay while the sun shone. And we're paying the price day by day. And I can see no hope that the Labour Party, if it were to come to power, would do anything to diminish that.
Let me agree with a lot of that, but it would be difficult, can I? Let's take the health service. For all sorts of good reasons, Blair and Brown increased very significantly the amount of money going into the health service. If you look at productivity, the National Audit Office report out this year, productivity has fallen. And I think one is that when I left university, I wanted a trade union job, so I spent my time applying for trade union jobs, only for executives to say, what the hell do you want, what were you for? When you've been to university, we don't want graduates working for us. And whereas I thought what we needed was a trade union movement, which actually said to employers, here's your investment programme. If you don't actually do it, we might think of striking over that. And therefore, the ethos that you expressed there about the public service, I think is crucial. I was also interested as a minister whether in fact that values of public service could actually be transferred to those parts of the private service who are operating in the public domain. I didn't get many takers in government for this actual quest. And to be honest with it, though I'm appalled by, when you look at the rip-offs that are occurring, I do think we have a real problem on the centre-left. That, I mean, our shipyard, we couldn't get them to consider their restrictive practices until the last ship had been built. And then they said that they're going to lift all the restrictive practices. We couldn't get another order, of course, on that basis. And we've got to get an atmosphere going in which the trade unions themselves are the great agents of change. And for that, I think you do have to have a framework that you're not about. I mean, some jobs come, but about the creation of new jobs. But I was with young people in Birkenhead who was on Teach First, and she was exhausted. I mean, the idea you get reform from teachers by being rude to them all the time when you're on the television. That doesn't mean to say we haven't got problems with the NUT. But to make out that all those dedicated people are what, you know, the trot-infested NUT in London is about, is absurd. And how do you actually take a workforce with you when they think all the time you're spending roughing them up?
It feels as if Tony Blair actually didn't deal with that. He didn't.
No, he certainly didn't. And he didn't. And the trade unions didn't help him deal with that. But I think the charge sheet against Blair is more serious than what you've said.
Another question? The gentleman?
Is profit a dirty word?
No. I thought it was, for example, first of all, it can make the world go round. It's whether it's excessive and how profit is used. I thought the train I got up from London today, I think it's Virgin hasn't bullied, have they? The government giving this contract, and they're going to give them the contract, aren't they? I thought when that was taken back into public ownership and the profit, was it £500 million for the taxpayers? I thought it was marvellous. It's very noticeable. David Runciman reviewed the Tom Bauer book on Virgin, and he concluded that the only area where Virgin makes money is not in any companies that are open to competition. It's only in those companies where they can win a franchise in a regulated market, where they can bully and use the law to terrify people. And when our side was falling over, isn't it brilliant? Virgin has got our route up to Liverpool, Manchester and beyond, up to into Scotland. I thought it was terrible. I thought what we want in Liverpool is another company competing with them, so we can get prices down, and therefore profit margins down. So if one believes in the market, let's have the market. But I do think, I don't think profit is a dirty word. I think it's like with wealth, it's what wealth is used for, whether it's good or bad, and it's what profit is used for. We've got many companies with huge company pension deficits. We need some profits so that the pension funds can survive.
Another question? Gents at the front.
Jeff Beacon, the Pollution Tax Association. Now, you don't seem very interested in climate change, so I won't press the point that a decent carbon price would pay for labour subsidies to get people into work, or to educate them, or to pay them to stay at home. The question I'll ask is about housing. Now, the Adam Smith Institute and the IEA say that it's a rigged market, and that the youngsters are paying enormous amounts of money to get into housing, and this affects life chances because it's passed on through the generations. And we could house people for about 30 grand, but you know, my daughters accidentally live in houses separately worth best part of $1 million. You know, they rather resent it, but that will go on to their children and affect their life chances. And what do you think of the Fabian Society pamphlet a few years ago on life chances, where most of the people involved had made $500,000 or more on their houses, and that might include the ex-director of Shelter, cashing in and robbing these young people?
Yeah. Well, I'm passionate about the environment. If you look at my website, you see that I helped establish the best of the environmental charities, Cool Earth, where we try and we raised quite a lot of money. Vivian Westwood thought the same press, it gave us £1.25 million for our work recently.
What kind, if you're interested in what carbon price would you put on? Is it 50,
No,
100, 1,000 a tonne?
We can't wait to work out the carbon price to save the world. There was all this talk and it hasn't actually worked. I'm all in favour of having a carbon price. In the meantime, the one thing that we can actually do is save the rainforests. That's the one thing we can do to slow down global warming. The one thing we can do is to protect those native tribes which we do. We give them the funds so they can have they can buy their own rainforest. The loggers still try and kill them, but if it's theirs, they fight more.
Doesn't the drought in the Amazon mean that's too late?
No, we have the drought because of the actual foolish way people have destroyed the rainforest, and that's one thing which one is actually trying to stop. And we're not buying chunks of it, we're buying firewalls, so to build protection around the great rainforest which still exists, so the loggers cannot get their roads through to tear the hearts of the forests out. And we now, this minor charity, which you clearly never heard of, now protects more rainforests, tiny as we are, with a very few people actually running it, than any other organisation in the world. So do look at the site. So I'm passionate about that, but I wasn't asked a question. So, but on the business about housing, one is again, that's why I think our borders should be controlled, because if you have 4 million people in and you don't build houses, you push up house prices. Secondly, I think we should build seriously, and green belts are a wonderful trade union to protect the wealth of those people who've got houses, and I'm in favour of building houses for those who haven't actually got houses. And I would love to have a wealth tax, and not for the government to actually gobble it up, but that the money is actually used to recycle as capital grants to younger people, so that they can start their life as couples together and so on more fairly than they would otherwise. And And I think we'd make a wealth tax rather popular if they saw it being redistributed, the results of it in this way, rather than thinking the Chancellor will spend it on his or her pet schemes. But sorry, I'm talking too much.
Okay, thank you for that. I'm going to say two questions at once. So the gentleman at the back, right far back.
Thank you. What can we do to ensure that corporations pay their fair share of tax? And I cite Vodafone as a particular example, but there are many others where they've relocated their procurement practices to Luxembourg. What can we do to ensure that to close those loopholes?
I'll just take another question to go with that. The gentleman with the glasses.
You mentioned the Bishop's letter, which was issued this week. Do you think it's right for religious leaders in general to participate in political debate?
First question, I think we should say to the next Labour government should commit itself to saying we have a VAT system. If you, given your turnover, are not paying corporation tax, we will in addition levy a sales tax. And the sales tax will be higher than the corporation tax you will pay. And if you don't want to trade here in this country, fine, go. And one of the great disappointments of you young people is that when we knew these copy companies were not actually paying any tax, I thought you'd have these wonderful sit-ins, you destroyed them. I just think you make it really, I mean, one of the things I spent efforts persuading the government last year to do a bill against modern slavery. And the bill's through, it's great. And I was looking about, about how we police it now, and it's so complicated. And what I want the Pope to do is to say, I want all of you to become, before you buy anything, to actually ask for the kite mark that the person selling it has done their best to make sure this is not tainted with slavery. And it would transform the position of slaves in this world if we as consumers committed ourselves, took a pledge to actually do that. But that's another campaign for around and after the election. So I think we should get really tough. I think it's terrible that constituents on meagre wages are taxed because these clever dicks think they can exploit us by moving their assets about. And on the Bishop's one, I think it's brilliant they've issued it, and I think the humanists should do it. Why should they be separate from the CBI or the Trade Union Congress? I think more than merrier putting forward their views about what is their vision of the good life. But what the bishops must realise, that once they start coming down into the bear pit of politics, they'll be treated as politicians. They're not on the hill anymore. They're not the light on the hill. They're going to be the yeast, and the yeast, as it carries out its function in baking the bread, gets lost. So the bishops will get lost in the heat of the political debate. But I think it's terrific that they've done it. The idea that somehow there are these sections of life that people are not involved in. And if you are a Christian, you surely believe that God has not just an interest in what happens afterwards, but everything about his or her creation. Of course, therefore, but it doesn't mean to say what you say is the truth. We all know truth is many-sided. The more people we get here, I think, and I want the Catholic bishops to issue theirs. And I don't know, where's the humanists? Why aren't they issuing their election address to MPs as well? I mean, they keep saying they keep getting pushed out of everything. Well, come on, where are they? The humanists I know are highly moral people. It's wonderful to have their contribution into the election debate. But I'm against the fascist idea. You can shut ideas out of politics, or people out of politics. We actually want all of them in.
Should we take two final questions?
Two more questions. Harry?
You said earlier that you want Ed Miliband to do a John Major, but isn't that the problem? He can't, because he's obviously the son of an intellectual Marxist. John Major was the son of a trapeze artist, didn't have a degree, didn't have A-levels, so he had a very working class story. Well, we may all disagree on that one, or we may agree on it, but Ed Miliband's got a very credible message, going up against bankers, the press barons when they took on his father, Millie Dowell, all the rest of it. He's got a great message, but the issue is the messenger no one believes. No one can look at him in the eyes and think he's going to fight for me. They think that he's, news just came out a few days ago, didn't it, that he gifted, well, the parents gifted the property to him and so he's just as smeared as the Tories are. So do you think there's an issue with the messenger? And the message is fine, it's the messenger himself.
No, I think it would be marvellous for... I mean, I think John Major, John Major's a lovely person. Not a terribly good Prime Minister, was he? And despite all his complexes, he got into that box and was good. And I think it'd be very good if Ed got onto the box and gave vent to what he really feels. I think just needs to get out away from all those people who could trying to control his what he says. A little about after the election, I hope Penguins are going to publish a book of mine, which is Brief Lives, which I mean, this is of course all autobiographies about you trying to justify yourself, so I don't want to write one of those. It's partly because one keeps one to think of the future, but I'm doing Brief Lives of 30 odd people I've met and who interest me, and I do think that when I went to visit Heath to lobby him when he was leader of the opposition, he had 3 staff. There was William Wargrave, who was chief of staff, and 2 other members of staff. That was the whole office. And when I'd asked him what he was going to do, and he said, yes, yes, no, yes, yes, no, might do. And I, in 15 seconds, said, great, I knew how to vote on the Labour budget, and therefore how to try and marshal the amendments and to get further concessions. Then he thought he ought to spend 44 minutes, 45 seconds with us, because I wouldn't have had a proper conversation with him. And he had to do lots of his speeches, because there was no one else to write them. Now, I don't know, I see all these people in, Cameron's office or Ed's office, and it's chaos. And they keep writing speeches for him to give. So people feel if you haven't given 3 speeches, you're not a proper leader. And you haven't written one of them. And I actually do think to get away from that and the internal politics of who's on top and all the rest of it, and just start talking seriously to the electorate is the most important thing you could do now for the last 80 days of the election campaign.
Final question from the gentleman.
Yeah, so I was interested in your views on participation in elections and in politics. As we all know, it's been dropping pretty steadily since the 50s. But rather than talk about the general picture, I wonder if you could tell us about how, if you looked at your own constituency, what it was like when you were first an MP in terms of Labour Party, membership in that party and the profile and the engagement and activism and what that looks like now. And whether there's any lessons in there for us.
Well, I mean, there's lots of lessons. And one is our party's bigger. It was 300 then, it's about 350 now, George. We've actually grown. But there's an immensely serious point here. In the last election, I got all the candidates to agree that we would put on the ballot paper, none of us, just to see whether, that people thought this was a really bad choice. And we were told the Electoral Commission wouldn't agree, and I wrote the Electoral Commission, and I mean, we still can't get a simple thing like that. But at the moment, it won't necessarily always be so, but whoever's the Labour candidate in Birkenhead will win the seat. I hope I'm not deceiving down on it. And therefore, I tried to get, before the Tories adopted it, that we should have open primaries. And that we should actually allow everybody to vote on who should be the Labour candidate, and we should have a list of people who could stand, wanted to be the Labour candidates. And that would really be thrilling, exciting, because there'd be, and I also think it wouldn't be dearer, because although one would have to pay for this, and you have the postal votes and ballot boxes open, all the rest of it, I genuinely think that after that, maybe after one election of that, the other candidates wouldn't fight the general election. The real fight would be in the primary. And that would determine who our representative is. And I think it's one, it actually protects you as a member, so you can speak for people. Because some people are worried about getting sacked by their political party, and it obviously can't be very healthy. So what's happened is, it's a safe seat and turnout is low. We don't know whether the choices they get are what the choices that people want. And it's lovely for me because the Labour Party adopts me. But I mean, most of the town are not included in choosing who will be their MP. And I think that should be so. And I think it would make for much more dynamic politics and engagement. And I certainly trying to learn new tricks. It's very interesting. But how do you engage with the electorate other than at political meetings? It's great to have political meetings because you can be embarrassed at them. But there's so many. My job has changed beyond recognition over the time I've been in Parliament, and largely because of these things. We try and answer our. I mean, it's overwhelming the emails we get. We try and answer, however daft they are, within a day or so. And what's charming is the number of people thank one. They were saying we never thought we'd get a reply, yet they write. And secondly, thank you for doing it so quickly. I mean, I don't do it. It's lovely people work with me that actually do. So there's a good market out there. But it's these new politics waiting for people to organise them in different ways.